pollution is a car which basically it's a solar powered car and to help turn the wheel and get you somewhere. Driving your car and the engine lets out pollution, the pollution will go through a small gap into a sealed little square connected to the car. The pollution will try to escape through the gap it came through, but the gap will then close automatically, and if too much pollution is stored in this little box, then the little box will clean the air and make the pollution disappear into normal air. Smoke mostly is.
Yeah, the vibration. Don't open it like this. Go like that because it gets my sound.
I can see a thick pigeon.
So this is a piece called Tracing Water, which I've been developing since doing a residency at the UEA with predominantly working with Dr. Kevin Hiscock, who's a hydrogeologist there, and they use this dye called fluorescein in experiments to test water flow, turbulence, and also points out where water pollution, the source of pollution. What we've done today is put 10 rings that we've cast the dye, about 50 grams of dye diluted in each ring. Each ring is about 50 litres of water, cast in rubber rings, frozen for about 48 hours, and then one by one bringing them down into the river and placing them between St George's Bridge and Phi Bridge, and as you can see, turning the river quite green. And this dye is a fluorescent, it's non-toxic, it's from an organic, it's like an organic acid, and it's used very commonly with scientists, so it's harmless to the river, but hopefully it's given something for audiences to think about their relationship with the river and water in general.
I'm pleased and gladdened that there's so many of us here tonight. I feel that the experiment is gathering pace. We're here this evening to celebrate our ability to live alongside one another, to celebrate our ability to act together, to celebrate the potential of outdoor urban space. In short, to celebrate Bowthorpe. 40 years ago, some bold decisions were made. Those decisions brought Bowthorpe into being. Those decisions added 4,500 new homes to the city of Norwich. Those decisions put council houses next to private houses, next to housing association flats. Those decisions meant that cyclists and pedestrians could go straight from A to B, while motorists were sent the long way round. Those decisions made Bowthorpe a habitable place. Now we want what Bowthorpe's got. Here, now, from this bandstand, we propose an enlargement of the experiment that began in Bowthorpe. We propose a generous increase, an emboldening, a rolling out of it to every street. We propose to retrofit the city. What will this transformed Norwich look like? We don't know. We want this cycle tour to show us. This is not a performance. We're not presenting you with a compelling illusion or a heart-breaking narrative. We're presenting you with an architecture of the imagination. We want you to slowly ignite it with the fuse of your thoughts. We know that a minimum number of changes to the traffic layout and street furniture will lead directly to changes in people's daily patterns of movement. But what will flow from those changes? By bending all our thoughts to this same question, as a group we can project ourselves into the future, to a time when the Bowthorpe experiment has shifted the texture of the city. This collective mental labour will take courage, solidarity and trust. Courage to persistently look through the present to the future that lies just behind it. Solidarity to cycle together and negotiate the roundabouts as a group. We will stop at a number of points en route and whet the sharp edge of our future sight against the coarse surfaces of the everyday. And at Bowthorpe itself we'll take matters into our own hands. We will gladden our flesh with tea and flapjacks.
Yeah, the first time.
We will gladden our hearts by watching Phil and Magda assemble their fantastic mobile cycle-powered cinema, and by using it to project a film onto the gable end of Roy's of Bowthorpe supermarket. By our own labours we will glow forth. So now we ask you to put your best foot on your foremost pedal and to push down hard on the brittle crust of the present, to crack it open, and to voyage into what lies beyond. Friends, citizens, fellow cyclists, I believe our faith is justified. Look at the perfection of this circle.
One down.
You're right.
Good evening, I'm Alex Kumquat, here with Jasmine Shinga.
You have just tuned into Sports UTV.
Breaking news, the famous boxer Carlos Carter has suddenly collapsed due to unknown causes in his most recent fight.
We are now going over to
Hello
Kirsty
again.
Alfred with more
This is
information.
Kirsty Alfred reporting from the G Boxing Ring, where Carlos Carter has currently fainted due to unknown causes. Will this be the end of the Carter reign? This is Kirsty Alfred saying good night and good luck, Carter.
Why am I here? Where am I? Where am I?
You're in a hospital.
Why exactly am I in here?
You just passed out during a fight.
What's gonna happen to me now?
A couple of tests were run.
Okay. Okay.
I've got to say, your results weren't as good as we thought they were. Do you know what I think? I think you won't fight again.
We need to talk.
Take a seat, Mr. Carter.
I have been running your lines over and over and over again in my head, and I have come to realize they don't make any sense. Well, not to me. I am a boxer. I was born to fight. Even from when I was a little kid, this is who I wanted to be, and now you're telling me I have to get up and walk away from that? I'm not ready to do that. I can't do that.
Unfortunately, sir, the CO2 emissions have affected your lungs too much for you to ever fight again.
Keep saying this. Okay, I don't care. I have to fight. This is who I am. This is not a career to me. This is my life.
If you fight, you may lose your life.
I know. It's a risk I'm willing to take.
Good morning and welcome to SportsView TV. I'm Alex Kumquat. Here is Jasmine Shinga.
Breaking news. There seems to be speculations around the boxer Carlos Carter. Possible reasons why he fainted, including his retirement.
We now go to our interviewer, Karen Felix, with more information. Good morning, and we are live at Professor Quinnut's lab.
It's just not alive. Yes, not the same when I just.
Thank you. What are the suspicions of the mystery of Carlos Carter?
Oh, I don't know what we did.
How did this pollution affect him?
It is a pollution. Beating not that beating us. And then it's and it's
How did this pollution occur in our area?
it is a pollution in the air. Pollution everywhere. Pollution here. It's by beating in the back of the guy. I see little thing. And it's wrong. Not back of the car. And then the back of the train doing I believe and then I was the back of the train. Send the car. Throw the car. Because it's small. Because it's big. Because it's nice. Yes.
Thank you.
Right, brothers. They're right always.
This is Karen Felix, reporter from Professor Quinnut's lab.
Good evening, my name is Kirsty Alfred, reporting live from the G Boxing Ring, where Carlos Carter and the Flaming Titan will be holding their final match. We wish you both good luck from YouTube TV.
Welcome back to SportsView TV. You are joined by Jasmine Shinga and Alex Kumquat.
It has been announced that the boxer Carlos Carter will today be playing in the G Boxing Ring at the risk of his own health.
We are now going over to our reporter Rebecca with more information.
Good evening. This is Rebecca Pear reporting from the G Boxing Ring, where Carlos Carter has finally recovered and is here to fight what is said to be the last fight of his career. All your fans and myself wish you the best of luck, Carlos. May this fight end in victory. This is Rebecca Pear saying good night and good luck, Carter.
Mr. Carter, why did you retire?
Well, the reason why I had to retire from boxing was because the air pollution gave me a high case of asthma, which made me pass out during my fights.
My daddy said that you fell over when you're fighting. Why?
Well, I passed out because of the asthma, which created a lack of oxygen pumping around my body.
I have asthma. Will it affect me as a sport person?
Well, there are a lot of athletes who do have asthma, but as long as you consult your GP and take the prescribed medication, you should be fine.
Double Pendulum is a short film that looks at the complexities of breathing. It's narrated by 4 well-esteemed scholars, and some of those narrations are played out by 3 athletes. Double Pendulum kind of looks at, the politics of how breathing is affected by pollution. It looks at the different lung capacities of male and female. It looks at how race impacts on how we breathe, and also, how where we live geographically kind of impacts on how we breathe. So for me, it's just dropping that pebble of consciousness that people will begin to kind of understand and be much more conscious of what they breathe, what are the factors that are affecting their breathing, some of the misconceptions that are still in the air about asthma, the fact that a lot of athletes that do high endurance sports actually develop asthma after their sporting career is over. The work is going to be screened at the View Tube. It's going to be very close to where the warm-up track is going to be for the track and field athletes in 2012. It raises some issues about the air quality in East London and how it possibly could affect the athletes that come here in 2012. The fact is that when you watch that film, you're already in that film, because from when you were born you were breathing, but you were never conscious of what you were breathing. Some films talk about kind of race, gender, or sexuality. This encompasses everyone. Double Pendulum is a breath of consciousness. It can enable the viewer to breathe and know. And I think that's the most important thing, to breathe and know.
Well, the way that we breathe principally involves the diaphragm. That is considered to be the primary muscle of inspiration for breathing in. There are many expiratory muscles for breathing out, but those muscles at rest aren't really active, maybe for a postural support role, but not in terms of breathing. As we start to increase exercise intensity and we start to require increased levels of ventilation, you start to recruit more of these expiratory abdominal muscles. But you also recruit more of the inspiratory muscles, and some of the other muscles of breathing are involved are some of the muscles of the rib cage, the so-called intercostal muscles, some of the muscles of the neck. You have the sternocleidomastoids here, and the scalene muscles that are also here. You also have some accessory muscles of the shoulders and the back as well that are also involved. And those muscles become more and more involved as the exercise intensity progresses.
The lung is an absolutely fundamental part of the human body. Without oxygen, we don't survive. Atmospheric oxygen is at 20.9%. As the oxygen level decreases in the atmosphere, less oxygen gets into our blood, our tissues and our brain become less oxygenated. With progressive decreases in oxygen concentration in the air, that will lead ultimately to unconsciousness and ultimately to fatality.
The quality of air in London has undoubtedly improved if we cast our historic mind back to the first half of the 20th century. When London had the great pea supers, the great smogs. That was extremely bad pollution, and it culminated in the great episode in 1952, where the real link between exposure to pollution and premature death was really established. And because of that, the government passed the Clean Air Acts, the late 50s, mid-60s. We know that pollution makes asthma symptoms worse. They did do a study which looked at children who lived in high versus low ozone communities. And to do that, they stratified the children into whether they played 1 recreational sport, 2 recreational sports, maybe 3 or more recreational sports in a given week. And what they found in that data was that there was a 3-fold increased chance of having asthma in that group, in the higher pollution group, if they spent lots of time outdoors exercising.
The thing is, there are 2 main components to asthma. There is a genetic component, but as well an environmental component. If, let's say, both parents have got asthma, it is really likely that actually you will as well develop the disease. With no family history of asthma, because of specific environmental condition, can also develop as a disease.
There are some male-female differences in the respiratory system, and these are starting to come to light in the last few years or so. Even for a given height, even for a given lung volume, the airways in the female are much smaller, they're much narrower. So consequently, there's much more chance of seeing what's called expiratory flow limitation, whereby you're basically putting air through a very small pipe.
Boys usually are more at risk for asthma than girls, but this is true only during childhood.
Some races, they actually have lung function, lung volumes that are typically about 10% lower than maybe in Caucasian races. The reason that most people believe is important is the fact that the length between here and here, relative to actual limb length, is much shorter. So consequently, your lung volumes are much smaller.
Many athletes indeed develop asthma or exercise-induced asthma during their career. We know that there are some athletic populations that are particularly at risk, especially all kind of endurance athletes, so the ones who sustain a very high ventilation level for a long period of time when they train, as well athletes who are exposed to cold, dry air, so such as cross-country skiers, or you have as well athletes who exercise in polluted environment. We have a lot of elite swimmers as well who develop asthma or exercise-induced asthma, and this seems to be linked to the presence of fluorine byproduct in the swimming pools that are actually very aggressive for the airways.
Disorder which causes the lung to stop functioning properly, for example asthma. You have a natural condition where you deprive the body of the oxygen that it needs for its normal function. Therefore, a person who is undergoing an asthma attack will behave as though atmospheric oxygen levels are decreasing. So just in terms of the response of their lungs, their body will become oxygen deprived, and therefore obviously when they're undergoing an asthma attack they will start to struggle.
The poor populations living in the most urban, highly trafficked areas of London are the ones who are suffering disproportionately. And Tower Hamlets and Hackney are 2 of the most deprived areas. And ethnically, if you look at London, what you tend to find is that the black population, the Bangladeshi population, the Asian populations, they're grouped very centrally within these high trafficked areas. And there's almost a migration of the white population around the outer suburbs of London. And so you almost have an ethnic divide. Whenever we talk about the impacts of air pollution, I think it's very important that we bear in mind that they are small in proportion to the impacts of cigarette smoking on the human lung. The children who have a parent who smoke at home, it's still around 30%. So, you still have large proportions of children growing up in London in homes with a parent who smoke. And although smoking behaviour has changed, the parents maybe smoke outside or try to avoid smoking in the presence of their children, we can still measure signatures of the metabolites of nicotine in their urine. And so I think it is important when we think about what we bequeath our children. It's not just an environment which we haven't despoiled, it's health. And that can be achieved by encouraging exercise, reducing obesity, improving diet, improving air quality.
I don't think the air quality in London is very good. For example, I once cycled through the Rotherhithe Tunnel and thought I was going to die. The fumes just were horrendous.
You can see the kind of haze and smog sometimes quite clearly, particularly on really hot days. So it is noticeable, yeah.
I'm a Pilates teacher, so I work with breath all the time. I run, I swim, and so all the things that they were talking about are really relevant in my life today and the life of people that I work with who exercise.
It's quite audacious actually to show that film right in front of the Olympic Stadium.
It's really interesting to have that information about the air quality and the impact on our health. It's kind of a bit frightening actually. I'm a bit worried about my children now.
It reminded me of the smog situation in China for the Beijing Olympics. I find this as a cyclist that is quite concerning, probably damaging my lungs every time I cycle.
It's a beautiful first sort of step towards looking at your own ways of breathing.
So my starting point is to be completely sceptical about art and science coming together and producing something wonderful. And this film does it. It is extraordinary, and it does that very difficult thing of being informative and beguiling and interesting and challenging and beautiful, and you've seen something very, very good and important.
So Bats in Space is a project that hopefully will allow the public to experience in real time the sounds and sights of bats. I like bats because they look great, they move in interesting ways, they live together in interesting ways. They are mammals that can fly, they're the only mammals that can fly. So they have a number of skills and properties that human beings will never have. And they're this strange hybrid of creatures, almost between a mammal, an insect and a bird.
So I got involved in Jeremy Deller's project because I was approached to try to help people understand what sounds bats make, and not just what they sound like, but what they actually look like too. This bat is a very nocturnal, kind of a secret creature, and it has all these ultrasonic calls that we can't hear. So effectively they're completely out of our range of hearing and seeing. So we don't really encounter them. And this project is a way into that secret world, because we've got some techniques which we can transform the sounds down into something you can hear and see. So bats will use ultrasonic sound for finding things and finding bugs in the sky to eat, so finding things to eat. So they will bounce the sound off an object and interpret the echoes. The bats also use sound for communicating between each other. So for example, a mother and a pup will be communicating by echolocation, and they also use sound for mating as well. So a male will attract females with a kind of mating chirp. On the walk, you will be able to listen to the bats flying about, finding food through the detector. The signal from the bats will be fed into like a smartphone, and so you'll be able to see the calls as they're coming in to the screen so that you can see what kind of shape they are. So you'll be able to hear and see the calls at the same time.
I'm interested in anything that can extend the language or our understanding of bats. And this definitely does that. And the use of technology, and also just the use of mobile phones and things that are accessible to us, can only help with that and make people more interested.
It's amazing to think that this world is out there that we just cannot hear and we don't experience. You get given a detector and this whole world opens up. This whole world of sound opens up that you have absolutely no idea was there. And you can see the calls, what sounds they're making. And seeing the calls makes you realise what they're using them for. So if you understand a little bit about sound, which I can tell you on the walk, then you can start to understand how bats are using those sounds to interpret their world.
You know, they don't have the best PR, bats, do they? They're actually incredibly helpful to us as creatures. And I think that anything that helps contradict these misconceptions is maybe helpful.
in myths they get a bit of a hard deal.
I didn't know there were any in Stratford.
I thought that sometimes they were a little spooky, but mostly they were very interesting. I think they're one of the best animals on Earth.
I was particularly amazed that there are actually bats over in the corner, and I think it's Jenny Clark is her name, manages to stroke these bats so that they meow into an iPhone that you can listen to, which is certainly a first for me.
Amazing array of live bats. She's absolutely stole the show tonight. Her and her bats are just really quite moving, I think. I never knew bats were so small.
This is one of those projects that is on the borderline of art and science, but also conservation as well. So it's quite odd. I quite like that idea. And
so a high frequency sound has short wavelengths. So it's like this, and it hits Alice because she's quite big. And
the echolocation really hits me. It's got such a deep resonance, so I feel really excited. And it's been lovely to talk to the scientists. I love the mix of the arts and science, so talking to the scientists tonight and just getting that really deep kind of immersion in that technology and culture has been wonderful.
So if you're some sort of bug or a mosquito, these are the sounds you really don't want to hear, because it means you're going to be dead very, very soon. So I'm just going to play them very briefly and then we can go on with the evening.
It's like a clicking noise. Here we are in Europe. And it's sort of like a dolphin, but a bit lower.
they sound a bit like pulse waves or something like that. They don't sound like they come from animals. They sound like they're almost electronic sounds, which I found quite strange.
It's something how wildlife lives in the cracks of this impossible and fascinating place that is London is great.
They have this sort of like superhero quality about them. There's this like amazing ability to understand the world in a way that you can't quite imagine. I think that's a really precious thing. And yeah, it'd be great for people to get involved.
Breathe is a video projection on the roof of St Thomas's Hospital, which is opposite the House of Parliament, and the animation contains 1,300 drawings. Dryden Goodwin has drawn his own son, and they are projected in a very large scale. The screen's about 8 metres tall, right on top of the roof of the hospital, so the projection looks out on the surrounding cityscape.
So I'm the lead scientist on the Exhale programme. This is a programme which is investigating the impact of bad air quality on children's respiratory health. Information has come out of California in the last 5 years which suggests that if children live or go to school near busy motorways, then there is the chance that they do not fully develop their lungs. And this is an issue which stays with them, unfortunately, the rest of their lives. So, if true, it's a really important public health issue. So we're looking at exactly the same question in London, where we have a lot of our schools on busy routes.
I was intrigued to have a conversation with
Professor Frank Kelly, and the potential within to respond to some of the underlying ideas and phenomena, and how his research gave a very particular sense of the body.
I hope the image of the shifting rhythms of the breathing, sometimes regular, sometimes faulty, sometimes laboured, can create a consciousness about the act of breathing.
This piece particularly is very dramatic and striking and poignant, and I think it will really make people think about what it means to them as individuals living in London, and crossing that Westminster Bridge and experiencing the atmosphere that we do on a daily basis without realising what that might be doing to our breathing and our lungs is just such an amazing thing.
Of course, the fact is that air quality is not a fact of nature. It's a result of all the industry and other human activities that we carry on. We need collectively to look at it
I work in Earth observation, which means that I'm interested in understanding the planet around us by analysing the atmosphere, analysing the Earth's surface, and working out how those gases and how the interactions between humans and the Earth relates to each other.
So we're representing like a spaceship is gonna set off, and we need to protect our equipment.
I've been involved in invisible dust for quite some time, since the conception when I met Alice. And the really exciting aspects of being involved with artists is the fact that artists can and have the freedom to express different points of view in any way that they want. As a scientist, we're trained to be very objective, very specific about the results and making sure that everybody can understand them and there's no bias in that data. The artist has the ability to then take certain points of our research and actually highlight those and make those points more meaningful to the general public.
The main thing about the Invisible Wave project that interested me was the possibility to look back at the body of work I made relating to satellite photography and representations of the Earth and the landscape, and sort of reframing it in the context of climate change.
Well, the thing I loved about your work is the fact that you are representing pixels, and that's what we do at a global level, on a satellite level.
Satellites are really important to be able to allow us to understand the world around us. So Earth observation satellites, taking data such as sea surface temperature from above the Earth's surface, give us the ability to look at a global perspective of how our climate is changing around us. So if we are going to look at things from space, we're a long way away from them than if we are taking images close up. So if we took an image of a tree from about 30 feet above it, we'd get something like this here. And we can start to resolve leaves. We can see the leaves. You can't really see much else. If we were about 400 feet above it, we'd get an image like this. Start to get pixelation. So you're averaging your area, or your leaf, over 1 pixel. Going higher up still to about 5 kilometers, your tree is now kind of blurred into big pixels. So now we're looking at resolutions of about 0.5 meter. Okay, now with some of the satellites we can get that, but with most of the satellite technologies we get this, which is resolutions of about 10 to 15 meters. So you can see our tree is now 1 pixel. It's now 1 average colour, which is difficult to get information out of, but not impossible.
Black spots are made in 2006, and the idea was to cover up a 30-metre square pixel with black in order to void it, sort of take it out of this digital map of the world. In restaging it with the children, it feels like it's a kind of attempt to really connect it to the sort of networked version of this digital map, which didn't really exist or was sort of coming into existence then.
The contours of the objective world fade more and more, and so it goes, step by step, until the world, everything we loved and by which we have lived, becomes lost to sight.
Marion Neudzecker has been working with Alex Rogers on deep sea projects for a number of years with me, and this year she's actually completed the first sort of part of that work, which is to make this sequence of videos that are being shown in St Thomas's Church at the moment.
We've provided her with a lot of video footage from our work in the deep ocean. We've talked at length about our work, which is a kind of cross between science and exploration, because we often go to places where other humans have not been previously.
For Now We See is the title of this, and it took me a long time to sort of get my head around what to call it as an installation, because it kind of works as a group of 8 films, and it is related to a Bible quote, but also it relates to sort of perception and mirrors and so on. For now we see in a glass darkly, but I quite like the sort of relationship of that context, but then also to do with the sort of difficulty of seeing under the sea and in that kind of depth, where they send the robots with the cameras mounted on them and film in torchlight in very difficult situations for us to see the situations down there. So it kind of made sense to sort of allude to both those angles of For Now We See.
We're interested in stimulating people to reflect on the relationship of their lives and the rest of the world, and so it fits entirely to have an exhibition about the deep ocean and human impact on it.
I think the most interesting thing for me has been that sense of a kind of environment that you're very up close and personal with, but that in normal life you'd have absolutely no access to. So much of what we say about climate change is really obvious and really immediate to us. Whereas here's an environment where we, at the moment, have absolutely no access to, and yet on the film, as you go around the church here, you see in a very immediate way.
So you get this sense of snippets of a reality that's kind of present somewhere else, and it's quite an odd, timeless sense, but at the same time, it's quite an urgent, imminent situation that is changing and is getting worse. And I think the conversation with Alex Rogers has also sort of taught me quite a few things about how desperately urgent the state of the ocean is and so on.
Almost everywhere we were working, we saw evidence of human impact. Now, a lot of that visible evidence is from deep sea fishing, but we also have made some other discoveries about things like the occurrence of plastics in the environment. So, when we're discussing these problems with people, they often say, oh, but there's nothing I can do about it personally. Well, there is actually, because everything you can do to reduce the intensity of your resource use will help the oceans in terms of climate change. You think very carefully about plastics that you're using and the way in which they're disposed. There are a whole raft of things which you can do.
So I hope that people might walk away with a kind of odd sense of everything being kind of, even if it's very subtle, sort of saturated with that kind of human impact.
Basic GCSE physics, basic science that we learn at school, tells us that the emissions that we're putting out from burning fossil fuels, the carbon dioxide, is going to change the climate, is already changing the climate. Our basic science that we learn at school tells us that.
The 28th of June last year, there's about 2 hours of quite intense rainfall, around about 110 millimetres in just over 2 hours. It was in the middle of the city, so we're not talking about flooding from the river, we're talking about flooding directly from rainfall.
I met Alice last year and we got on immediately, and I love the work that she commissions. This collaboration with Invisible Dust was an opportunity for us to look at some of the areas that her work explores and her commissions explore, but within the context of the Great North Run and what we do at Great North Run Culture. And Adam's piece is a perfect example of that, I think.
So the piece is called Rising, and it's being played, it's being broadcast on Basic FM at the point where the run is finishing So it's very directly aimed at people who have completed the race either as runners or as spectators and are kind of going home and have finished. Its existence as a kind of radio broadcast is one way it's being mediated, and then also today we're doing a performance of it at the Tyneside Cinema.
So Adam Chodzko's piece has been developed through a number of scientific relationships. It's been developed through working with Dr. Claire Walsh, but also through the Invisible Heat project. This is a new project that Invisible Dust is creating, and we're just at the research stage of it now. And very excitingly, Adam's created Rising as part of that. And he's quite interested with the flooding and maybe that human bodies may change in the future, grow gills, become more aquatic with the need to actually live underwater.
Climate change is clearly one of the biggest questions I think we have scientifically at the moment about the threats that accompany it, the responses we need to how to take action to try to limit climate change if we can. A large component is interested in questions of climate change and health. So asking questions about in what ways does the weather, or as a kind of indicator of climate change, how does that affect health through such things as raised temperatures, extreme weather events, changes in the distributions of disease in populations?
So yeah, I mean, something that I found really fascinating within the Invisible Heat Dialogue Day is that there's all this sort of scientific fact about what global warming is doing, and about carbon emissions and all the rest of it. What I find fascinating is that people can be presented with that factual evidence and yet still somehow personally, on a personal level, can make a decision that maybe other people need to start driving so much, for instance, or flying, but personally you need to, and it's sort of justified. So there's a sort of weird narcissistic way in which I think we'd like to count ourselves. You know, we're concerned and we see it as being sort of hugely important, yet at the same time manage to carry on behaving in a way that we find comfortable.
It kind of takes you to a particular place. It's a kind of an imaginative leap, I think, that happens when you're kind of thinking about how you're trying to kind of connect to this sort of idea of rising water levels with this connection with the Great North Run or runners. So yeah, it's a strange and incredibly immersive experience. The sound of the voice and the kind of the journey that voice takes you on is really beautiful.
Right now, I'm. Where am I? I can't quite tell. It's on the top of a roof. The pale green roof of the Royal Infirmary. Ahead of me I can see the little islands made by the tops of the Civic Center and the floating pontoon track stretching between them and Shieldfield House, heading, I guess, well, south for a bit over where the river used to be, then east out to the end to where the sea used to be. Now the sea is here. This was the route of the final run. I only started a day or so ago, but already the recently raised pontoon is partly submerged again. The water's been rising so fast.
The piece becomes, and you know, for me, a kind of exploration or an idea of kind of programming, that if somehow in a kind of half asleep state, you can put people in a kind of half asleep state, portray this sort of notion of a flooded Newcastle, perhaps somehow that will enter the subconscious enough to trigger a kind of behavioural change in the sort of normal, you know, daily reality.
Okay. So counting down from 10. 10. 9. 8. 7. 6. 5. 4. 3.
to be blunt about it, we've been working as climate scientists for the last 15, 20 years trying to communicate climate change. And I think PowerPoint's wonderful. I think chalk is wonderful. But we've singularly failed to get the importance of this message across. So trying other mediums to communicate the issues and the severity of issues around climate change is what the purpose of today is.
So good morning and welcome to you all, ladies and gentlemen, to this Ways of Seeing Climate Change session.
This is an important event, perhaps a little experimental, but I think it's important for several reasons. Firstly, I doubt that many, or I don't know of any established scientists who would question the validity or the importance of climate change to the future of everybody on the planet. But we know it's highly complex, the messages have been mixed, and they are difficult to get across to non-scientists. So the purpose of this event, I think, is to see how art can help us to communicate complex messages. The focus of today is climate change, but I actually think it's of value more broadly in science, because I'm sorry to say to the scientists here, we are really not very good at explaining what we do in simple, plain words that are accessible to people who don't understand the jargon we use.
In terms of invisible dust, hopefully everybody knows by now what we do is we get artists and scientists together and we work on climate change and environmental projects. I set up Invisible Dust with a scientist who's actually based at University of East Anglia, a guy called Peter Brimblecombe. He's an atmospheric chemist. And when I first met him, I started talking to him about what he researches, which is air pollution. And when I said to him, how do you research air pollution because it's invisible? He said to me, I measure dust through time. And I thought, what an amazing thing for someone to do, to look at something so infinitely tiny and measure it through time. It just sounds like an art project. I was totally baffled by this. And so really, that's the start of Invisible Dust.
This is the state which we've got into. The eyes glaze over now. We are so used now to being assaulted, battered by facts and figures and if you like, the sort of that end of science. And it's very difficult to know what to do about it. It's like a different language. It's a foreign language, I think, sometimes that people are using. Because the reality is we don't live in the rational world, and cold scientific facts and figures are really not really on the agenda of most people. We demand truth and we demand facts, but frankly, when we get them, we tend to hide away from them. So what do? I think we do respond to stories, to human emotions. We respond to art, we respond to poetry, and we're moved by these things, and that's the whole point. But we're not moved by science. We think about science, we accommodate it, but we're not moved by it. In other words, science in itself does not necessarily change us. It doesn't take us from one place to another. It tells us what is there.
I always get told that my talks are doom and gloom. That's probably the more upbeat parts of it. So I'm going to start off, I start turning the talks around, so I start off with the conclusion, which is a bit more positive. So here we have the conclusion taken from a paper, which I was surprised it was a peer-reviewed paper by the Royal Society, or peer-reviewed by the Royal Society, and it got through this final statement, but I was very surprised by it. This paper, this message on climate change is not a message of futility, but a wake-up call of where our rose-tinted spectacles have brought us. Real hope, if it is to arise at all, will do so from a bare assessment of the scale of the challenge that we now face. And I think that's probably where as scientists, we've let the policymakers and the public down, was we have not been open and honest about where we are in the emissions, particularly in the emissions side that go along with the climate change issues. And I'm going to try and sketch that out a little bit here. But it's an upbeat message that if we are honest about where we are, and we're probably getting to the point where we're on the cusp of almost leaving it too late, then we still have some opportunities to make some changes that could deliver a climate resilient and livable future.
Now to our hamstring curl. That's it. You've got it. The most important thing is to keep the system going. That's it. Keep it moving now. Keep consuming all the time. That's what it's all about. Now let's pick up the pace. That's it. Let's get faster. Let's consume more and more and more and more. Let's do it now. Keep working it. Come on. Faster. Faster. Harder. Faster. Stronger. Better. Push it. Now to our half jack.
So one of the things that I'm really fascinated about is how artists, scientists and citizens that are trying to make change happen can deal with these kind of quirks from which kind of culture emerges. So it's not necessarily about the carbon, but about the weird stuff that we do, like putting chicken in the fridge. I think Kevin touched on it, 20th century behaviours, and we need to deal with 21st century. So we need to foster this imagination that will lift us out of our kind of weird past and put us into a new future. And so I think this is the intersection that I'm really interested in exploring a little bit further.
Now, I want you to all help me out here. I want you to do me a favour for about just a minute and a half. I want you all to put your hands here, and I want you to hold your breath when I say go. And when you can no longer hold your breath, you drop your hands. Okay? 1, 2, 3. Go. Hold your breath. The reason why I did that is about what really matters. You know, what actually really matters to us. And I think the air that we breathe is the most important thing. You know, we put a lot of emphasis on having a great job, having a big house, having lots of money. But when you think about it, you know, what really matters is what we breathe.
My proposition is that scientists have trouble communicating about climate change in part because they have trouble talking about some kinds of change, any kind of change. I don't think it's particularly their fault. What I would say to you is science, when it comes to talking about change, people have very clear expectations. When scientists talk about change, it's expected that it's progressive, that they will say, look, we're going to have more understanding, and more understanding will give us more prediction, and more prediction will allow us to control it and give you more certainty. That's what we expect from science. And always have, right from the beginning, right from the Renaissance onwards. Which means then it's very difficult as a scientist if you then stand up and say, well, look, we've made a huge breakthrough in the last 30 years, and the breakthrough is we now know that we will be able to predict certain aspects of our world less. And there will be uncertainties, which we thought once upon a time we'd just get rid of. Now we know they're going to be there forever. So we probably can't control it as much as we used to think we could in the 70s. Science itself, I think, can enter a dialogue with arts because science has a wealth of wonderful theories and wonderful ideas which have a strong metaphorical strength to them, which can be used.
We shouldn't worry too much about what's the best. Spend hours and hours or days and days or months and months analysing what's the best thing that we should do. That we should really just get on and do it. And I think probably that was the take-home message. There's plenty of things that we can be doing and that we should already be going out there and demonstrating that there are options for moving ourselves towards a lower carbon, more sustainable society.
Yes, I'm back on the deck. I see no movement. Everyone's still sleeping. But now that there's no need to run anymore, I wonder what we'll do. I mean, we all became runners. That's who we are. I just wondered. So we need to stop now? Okay.